Once again, we're compared to Tulsa. Tulsa is a 287G program. We are not. The Oklahoma County Detention Center has not made any changes whatsoever. We do follow the federal statutes that mandate certain things. Prior to the ICE agents being in our receiving area, we were calling ICE, and by them being present, just expedites the situation, because a lot of people arrested when they come to jail, they give bogus names, bogus social security numbers, no ID, things like that. So ICE agents being present kind of expedites that for us, but we're not doing anything different than we've ever done. And we're certainly not part of 287G like Tulsa is. Mr. Honeycutt, could you expand on that, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Gene Bradley agreed with me as well. So to echo the sheriff's point, the ICE individuals in the office are strictly for identification purposes. They facilitate a quicker identification process for any individual that's booked into the facility. And so we don't take it a step further than that. Once the citizenship status is identified, then we complete the booking process, and ICE at that point will make a determination whether they want to place a hold or not. And so we don't partnership with ICE. They don't deputize our officers in any manner. So you hear a lot about 287G program, and that's where they fully train you up. You're authorized to serve papers, arrest powers on ICE issues. Some agencies choose to participate in that program, and we are not one of those agencies. So more recently, there's a program called the Warrant Service Officer Program, where it's kind of like 287G light, where you have limited authority under ICE statutes, where you're able to now serve a warrant to effectively take somebody into custody. And I believe that was born out of, you may have heard of a 48-hour detainer or a 48-hour hold, where they want to have you come along and maintain custody of someone after they've concluded with their state charges. And so we also don't participate in that program. So we will hold an individual while they're on the state charges. Once that state charge is completed, whatever that remedy is, we will notify ICE if there's a detainer, and they've got until we cut that guy loose to come get them. We're not going to hold this individual any longer than necessary, simply because ICE has requested that action.
So it's my understanding that the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office does not proactively or do immigration enforcement.
That's correct.
It's my understanding that the Oklahoma City Police Department does not do active immigration enforcement, nor have either of them for a long time, if ever, along those lines.
I know we were approached over a decade ago to have some interest in pursuing the 287G program, and the sheriff at that time also chose not to participate in that program. The individuals, I mean, we are doing nothing different than in years past. It's just the only difference is simply somebody is in the building, not on the other end of the phone line.
I also understand that ICE has asked that if there are if there are illegal immigrants that are arrested, they be notified of that based upon the information that you have.
Correct, and that's where they go to that next station of the booking process, and that's how they're educated whether or not they want to determine if they want to provide a hold or not.
So no one's going out looking for illegal immigration.
Correct.
What you are doing is if you book somebody into the facility for other charges, for other charges, and they are an illegal immigrant, ICE is notified.
Correct.
And that's a policy that's been done for forever. And the reason this has become a recent issue is because of the new attention on it based upon the increased immigration enforcement by the federal government.
Correct. There are other agencies out there that are taking proactive steps to increase their numbers in efforts to assist ICE in deportation actions, and we're simply not one of those agencies.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
I have two questions. The first was how many people have been held? And I know you probably don't know if they've been deported, but how many people have been held by ICE since the beginning of the year?
Okay, just to be clear, when we say held by ICE, the answer to that would be 0, because we are not holding for ICE, and we will not hold for ICE. We only hold people that are there on either municipal, due to a contract, or a state charge.
The 48 hours that they put a hold on?
So they place a hold, they request that you put a hold on them for 48 hours, and we don't honor that. So,
And are the ICE officers there at the request of the sheriff, or do they have the automatic right to be there at the jail?
I wasn't part of that decision. I assume, but I would assume that would have been a discussion between Sheriff Wetzel and vice agent that was in charge of that this area. And I think 2015 is when it came in.
I have one small question just based on Trustee Arnold's question about the hold in Aegis online. When we see ICE hold, if you are not holding them for ICE, what does that ICE hold, what does that mean?
So that would just simply, to correct me if I'm wrong, that would just simply mean that when it's time to release them and start working up the release, you would notify us at that point. And then they've got however long it takes to release them to come get them.
There wouldn't be like a section for detainer or whatever other language we use. It's just a box that's already there.
Similar if Oklahoma City had a hold on them, they would say Oklahoma City hold.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, if I might. Now, ICE is there, two ICE officers, so they must be taking someone. If I understand correctly, at various times, people are brought into the Oklahoma County Jail, mistakenly charged, as we read in the paper not too long ago. Or I know sometimes people, depending on whomever might be the arrestor, might be brought in for fairly minor charges, which would only be a misdemeanor. I remember times when, I don't know how many people here remember the Rio Bravo bar down on Walker, I think, or Robinson, one or the other. And every Friday night, the police would raid the Rio Bravo and bring a bunch of guys in. Some of them would be brought to detox, some to jail. But I think that runs counter to whatever the mayor may be trying to say about the city and a welcoming attitude and an attitude where people do not feel threatened, where people who are here working are able to go ahead and attend to their jobs and their family and their recreation without threat of, being picked up and sent back on some minor charge. And I guess my question is whether to some degree we might be participating in that, and whether or not we might want to have a discussion with the mayor about whether this fits into his vision of a welcoming city.
And I appreciate that point. But there are a couple different components contained within it. And so number one, as far as if we go back to the Rio Bravo days, obviously the sheriff's office isn't engaged in any type of roundup or any type of efforts that would facilitate those types of encounters with an ICE agent. And so secondarily, when you say that there's 2 ICE agents there, so they're picking people up, I think that's a little bit of a misnomer in as much as those 2 individuals that are present at the facility, their task was just simply identifying citizenship status. And so it's more of a clerical nature, not a enforcement issue.
Okay, well, let me follow up if I might. I think I read in the paper this last weekend where there were traffic stops looking for, they just stopped people and you had to go show your driver's license and your whatever and I think the sheriff's office did participate in that. Looking for drunk drivers. Well, it was in the paper. I mean, that's all I could tell you.
Yes, sir. That's actually a DUI checkpoint. That has nothing to do with
Well,
citizenship status.
But what if somebody's there? I mean, sure, DUI is a bad deal, but I'm just wondering if that's what we really want to do. And I know you're not the policymaker. We're trying to get a handle on that, but that's still my question.
I would just think if you were to ask a member of MAD, it's definitely against drunk driving. I would
Well,
imagine
they
they
don't
would
have-
definitely be.
They don't have a role in this issue.
No,
I mean,
they do the DUI enforcement, sir.
well, but what if, I mean, this is not whether or not you're gonna do DUI enforcement. It's whether or not somebody is gonna be sent back to another country and separated from his family because of some minor issue. Now, we could talk about whether or not MAD would see that as a minor issue, but I think that's not the issue here.
Well, I think the larger.
If you get arrested for DUI, you're sent to jail and separated from your family.
Is the individual's efforts of those ICE agents within the facility. Again, we are still required to verify the identity of the people that are coming into our facility. And so how do we do that? We notify ICE. And so whether they're sitting in the building or on the other end of the phone line, the interaction they have with our staff is that limited. And so we're not engaged in any more effort or extraneous activity to inject ourselves into ICE's business than is minimally required by us.
Okay, and are you required by law to establish citizenship?
Yes.
By law? Federal law, state law, what law?
Yeah.
Federal statute. And in addition to federal statute, I mean, we need to know who we're booking in. We need to know who we have in custody. You had brought up lots of different issues in regards to booking in the wrong person or arresting the wrong person. It's very important for us as an agency to know who we're booking in. And part of that is identifying who they are, their citizenship, past criminal history, all of those different types of things.
Madam Chair, I'm not really satisfied with where we are with this. I think maybe, and I don't know how that happens, but I think we need further discussion.
Trustee Brown, we certainly were. As a reminder, it's not our policy at this time. So until we have the operation of the detention center, our hands are a little bit more limited to learning more about what the current policy is. And perhaps I appreciate the sheriff and his staff and Mr. Honeycutt for coming and explaining the current policies and procedures. And so at this point, we're learning from them.
I'm still trying to identify what kind of problem this is in terms of magnitude, how many people. And I asked the question wrong earlier, so I don't know how to ask it exactly, but how many people have been identified as not a U.S. citizen who you've then notified ICE of since January?
We'd have to get with ICE and we'll look and see if we can't find a determinable number for you
But
to get.
10%?
I mean, I would
5%?
hate to even
Okay.
speculate.
Not even that much?
Couldn't guess.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't want to venture a guess.
But we'll do our best to see what we can find out for you.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair, just a couple questions. You were talking about holds earlier from ICE, and you honor holds from other jurisdictions, right? Other cities and
Yes, sir.
states, but not ICE. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's more of a procedural deficiency in ICE's holds than there are with like the municipal hold or a different hold out of county.
So for an out-of-county hold, there's is there statutory or what's the basis by which you would honor those holds as opposed to an ICE hold?
Well, there's some Fourth Amendment concerns when you're talking about an ICE hold because it's not a judicial order. It's not arising out of any proceeding that's established probable cause or something like that. The holds that you're talking about are established off of a warrant or a charge out of another county that have been more, I guess, vetted, for lack of a better word.
Well, at least vetted to the point of getting a warrant, not
Correct.
You know, not talking about
Correct.
convictions.
No, definitely not convictions.
Okay. Now, does this have to do with the SCAP grant, or can you explain what that grant is?
No, the effort that is occurring with ICE agents in the facility has nothing to do with the SCAP grant. The SCAP grant, and for those that may not be aware of the SCAP grant, that's the federal government will return to a detention facility monies for expenses incurred for housing illegal immigrants at whatever point of the process that occurred. So, I think last year we received $50,000 or something of that nature. And so it's not a housing contract, that type of instance, where you're getting compensated for the housing of prisoners. This is just simply they're recognizing that during the course of a year you will have housed people in illegal status, and so they compensate you for the expenses incurred due to that.
And that's a grant or contract that you brought before the Board of County Commissioners, and that was passed by unanimous approval, correct?
Correct.
And we're getting money from
grant.
We're getting money from ICE for that.
I'd have to go back and see which level of the Department of Justice that it comes from.
Okay. From the federal government.
But I'd be comfortable using the federal government.
Are there other federal law enforcement programs that impact us, U.S. Marshals, anything like that? Do we cooperate with them if they put a hold on somebody?
U.S. Marshals
Yeah.
is that they would have a criminal charge.
Yeah.
So same sort of thing.
Yeah, and I'm also, other than, we don't partner with, anyone else for necessarily enforcement actions. We've got a few people out on, I know we've got some out on the U.S. Marshals Task Force, but that's irrelevant to this discussion.
I did just have a clarification. So if there's the failure to pay warrants or failure to pay bail or some warrants are out, you're there for identification purposes in large part, but someone's come back, so they've already entered the system and they're coming back in and they've been picked up on a warrant. Are those housed, how has that worked as far as notifying immigration? Because they've already been in the system, so they may be, would we have already identified them, or does that not happen? It might be a very convoluted question.
I'm trying to work my way through it. Yeah, the reality is, it is just a identifying process, and so you're not going to be held any longer than necessary. And so to answer your question as far as once they've already been identified, then I would assume there would have been, if they would have been picked up on the first time, when I say picked up, I mean identified in ICE's system, ICE may have taken action, and so if you come back in, that status issue may or may not be still present.
Any other questions?
Well, I would like, to do it on the spot, Mr. Hankett, but for my own edification, I'd like to know kind of why the difference legally between holds from other jurisdictions and ICE, because it seems to me like, cooperating with, I appreciate all the reasons that people give. It's, the advocates for people fleeing violence in other countries. During the Vietnam War, my own family, we housed a man in our house who had fled the horrors of Vietnamese socialism. He was a refugee until he could get on his feet and all that. I saw this happen in Iraq, where they brought in a little orphan girl, the Missionary Sisters of Charity, through the base, and I was wanting to publicize and raise money, and they asked me not to because that would make them a target for terrorism. I get it, that people are fleeing violence. It's very important. That's a voice that you heard. I also recognize other voices in this space. There are people who face competition in jobs from people coming over here. These are all voices. All of them need to be heard. We're not going to run that to ground here, but I'd like to know why we honor and enforce some holds and not others. If you could.
How would you say that?
Thank you.
Mr. Honeycutt, captains? Sheriff? Mr. Brown, for your questions? Trustee Calvi, item number 9.
This is to ask that the trust recommend, and I obviously can't speak for my fellow commissioners, but I think I would be amenable to enlisting the assistance of the county's purchasing department for the trust once it comes time for the trust to be able to purchase items, and of course has to comply with the State Purchasing Act. So it would just be to, I guess at this point, be to recommend and accept the services of the county purchasing department for the trust when it comes time for us to purchase items.
No, thank you.
I'll go ahead and move it.
Did you fill out a form?
It's in there. Sorry, I have to lower it so you can
I
hear me.
don't blame you.
So I want to start by thanking everyone that's attending today. Particularly, I want to share the numbers that you requested. Clearly, the county jail does not have those numbers, and it's for a reason, and it's the way that that jail is running. According to the ICE tracker on how many detainers have been issued in 2018, in Oklahoma County Jail was 667. 2019, so far, we've had 131 ICE detainers honored. I think to the point of what we were speaking initially on identifying individuals and being able to prove their identity, that also brings a great topic for Oklahoma and being able to provide state IDs for undocumented families, if that is our biggest concern. I believe that funneling people into ICE and the deportation machine does not further make us safer. That affects families throughout the state, and it further penalizes the way that our communities in Oklahoma are living. And I just want to share briefly, because I know the concern is time, that families in Oklahoma do not feel safer with those two agents sitting in Oklahoma County Jail.
I'd feel safer with
The
200
police
of them
department does
I
not
need more.
actively
Two's not enough.
cooperate with ICE. However, minor traffic violations, such as a broken taillight, such as a DUI, which in fact deportation, it's a second punishment for the person that ends up in Oklahoma County Jail. And things such as not having a driver's license, which is out of the control of someone who's not able to obtain one in the state of Oklahoma. With that said,
These
you land
deterrents
into
from being here
Oklahoma County
illegally.
Jail thinking that your family is going to be able to provide a bail so that you're able
There's
to
my
redeem
neck. Stab
yourself.
me in it.
I believe in full accountability from people. I don't disagree. But I disagree in thinking that we are not deportation agents. Because the moment we allow space for ICE agents to be present, we are ICE agents. The only difference is that you're not deputized to do so. However, by you passing on a second screening, pretending that the only reason is to verify citizenship or verify identity, is also playing complicit to the way that that agency is running. We've had over 131 families in Oklahoma City and the metro area affected by this. You cannot tell me that we are not deporting our people. With that said, those 131 people do not get to go home, do not get to redeem themselves, do not get to go home and say, I made a mistake, and this is how we're going to move forward from now on. I particularly had a friend who was booked into county jail for drug dependency issues. He was doing his probation, and he was picked up outside of work after he left Oklahoma City County Jail. You know why? Because you also make public the records of the people who end up in county. So if you're lucky to get out of jail, they still have all your information to come and find you. So you are the deporting agent. You don't need to have a vest that says ICE because you're already acting as one. He has been detained for over 3 months without a chance for bail. His family is scared. And they're scared because they see how people treat people with substance dependency. They're scared that the overall record of who is worth of human decency and dignity is based on the mistake or the accountability you can take for yourself. That because you made a bad decision, now you're not worthy of humanity. These are not illegal people. These are undocumented. If there was a path to be documented, I can think of a freaking person that will stay undocumented. And I can say that for myself. I'm a DACA recipient. Have been living in Oklahoma for 15 years. And if I had a chance to adjust my status fully, that would have happened. So it's selfish to say that people are just going to be funneled into Tulsa. We don't need to compare ourselves to Tulsa because we're doing the same thing. The only difference is that they have an actual building. And we shield ourselves into saying that we're a welcoming city. We shield ourselves saying that we don't have a 287G agreement, but we're doing the same thing. So when we look at ourselves in the mirror and talk about how we are not the city of Tulsa, we are not Arizona, we are not Alabama. Black and brown bodies are criminalized more than any other minority. And we can truly say that we're not funneling people into this machine and go to sleep, go kiss your children knowing that people don't get to do so the moment they go to county jail. So if we want to support the community, we can do two things. We can end having ICE agents, which we federally don't have to do. There is no such thing, federal statute, that forces you to have ICE agents in the county jail. That is a lie. You clearly don't have the numbers of how many people are actually affected. So that tells you how well that program is running. And if your issue is trying to identify or make Oklahoma safer, then issue driver's licenses that don't disclose people's immigration status. Issue state IDs that don't disclose people's immigration status.
Ms. Garcia? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Addy?
My name is Jess Eddies. It's a sad day to have to stand with my brothers and sisters and advocate for an issue that seems pretty clear on the question of the breach of human rights that's occurring in Oklahoma County Jail, joined with this issue of migrant human beings who are being, their lives being disrupted, their families hurt and damaged. And Oklahoma County's complicitness in that needs to be addressed. Sheriff Taylor, I request that you immediately remove ICE officers, cease calling them, and any relationship with the federal government. As you and I both know, this notion that the Oklahoma County Jail has any respect for statutes, standards, or conditions regarding incarceration of individuals is nil. I think we all know that all federal inmates are housed in Grady County because the federal government has declared your jail unconstitutional. Any place that's been declared unconstitutional by a federal government like the United States of America that incarcerates more individuals than anywhere in the world is dang sure a jail that shouldn't have anybody in it. More or less, I'm here today. I look at a board with the exception of Mrs. EPLURIBUSOTAP, and I see a bunch of white faces. And I mean no offense by that, but I see a jail filled with black and brown people. And that's a problem. The assemblance of this board has made one fatal mistake that hinders it and disables you from ever truly garnering community support, and that is you have failed to include these people. There's no representation. There is no one that looks like them. And that, my friends, leaves behind a proportion of the community and will forever leave any work that you have done to be undone. As we all know, that this work that oppresses people, that leaves people in a torturous hell, that damages lives and ruins life, will eventually be undone. As the progress, the youth, the black, the brown, the women wrest control from the American history of a white male patriarchy. It's my burden and my responsibility as a white male who comes from privilege in Oklahoma City, who has been on both sides, inside and out of institutions of wealth and power and affluence, of abuse and crime, seen it all. It's my responsibility as a white man to address you all and to say that we are not doing what we should for the lesser and the least and the people without in our community. They do not have the privilege that we have. They do not have the advantages that we are given. And they are demanding power, and they deserve the power. And their voices will continue to grow, and their following will continue to expand, and they will meet you at every juncture, and they will be here, and they will continue, and you will eventually fold, and you will eventually honor them for the decency, the integrity, and the principle that they embody. So please, be proactive, recognize the inevitability, and honor them, and do what's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Hill.
I come to speak to you today as a retired 30-year high school teacher. I just want to tell a few personal experience stories. I do want to start off by saying since I've retired, I have worked or not really worked, but spent a lot of volunteer time working on education issues and criminal justice reform issues in particular. As a teacher, this subject impacted me several times, so I'm just going to tell you a few stories. Okay. First was a family, a Guatemalan family that we had as basically our custodians in our science building. In our science building, the other buildings would go, wow, your building always looks so much better than our building. And it was because we had such a personal interest in that family, and they took such a personal ownership of us. So much pride in us. And they were their patron, I guess, and the family was their 70-year-old uncle. And when he didn't meet the letter of the law, he was sent back. That family fell apart. We lost them as our custodians and caretakers in our building. And it was startling how quickly the building fell apart, and even a sense of family that we had. I taught AP biology for 20 years. I had an amazing young man in just my regular biology class and zoology class, and all of a sudden he starts to slide off and coming to class. I've been talking springtime, we're talking about how much I'm looking forward to and encouraging him to take AP biology. And he finally admits to me that his father has gone and he's going to have to go to work, probably in landscaping or something, and his educational career ends. Two young women, one of them outstanding student that I had, so much promise. And for the same reasons, I now go to her food truck once a week and she waits on me. And it's not right. It's just not right. We have too many problems in this jail. We have too many problems in this state, in this county, across the board, expense-wise, civil rights-wise. This is just not the way we should be doing things. There's too many people who recognize that. And that goes across the board too. Like Mr. Eddie, I speak as a privileged white woman. And there are many of us, and we need to speak up. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Maura K. Bobby K. Mo. Thank you. It's as easy as it looked then.
Good afternoon. My name is Mo Kay. I'm a transgender woman living in Oklahoma, and I'd like to speak about trans people held in Oklahoma City jails and ICE detention centers. As of 2016, 28 transgender women were held in ICE detention centers. Transgender women held in ICE detention centers are subject to misgendering, they are subject to being held in male facilities, and they are subject to solo detention that keeps them separate from the population and punishes them for the sole reason of being a transgender woman. In the state of Oklahoma, transgender women are also held in male facilities. This is beyond dangerous for us. And the number of transgender women that are Black and brown held in jails and ICE detention centers is astronomical. I speak as a white transgender woman. I am not at risk in the same ways that Black and brown transgender women in this community, across the country, and in this world face on a daily basis. 3 transgender women have died in ICE custody this year. One of these transgender women, and you'll forgive me for just a moment, I'm going to look up her name. I've got it right here. Her name was Johanna Medina Leon. And she died because she was denied medical treatment while being held in ICE detention centers. I come before you today to speak with these women, not for them and not over them, but with them. And I would ask for the immediate removal of ICE agents from Oklahoma City Jail and the discontinuation of notifying ICE agents of people detained by Oklahoma City County, or Oklahoma County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kay. Amy Bradshaw.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. Forgive me for reading from notes. Oklahoma is known for having the highest incarceration rates in the United States, as others have noted, and we'll doubtless note again. Not just in the United States, but in the world. This is an extension of our history of forced relocation and concentration of indigenous peoples, and the still ongoing harms to vulnerable populations and communities through practices of environmental racism and the prioritizing of profits to billionaires over protecting the most basic of human needs for clean water and land. Oklahoma is last in the nation in support for public education at both K-12 and higher ed levels, lowest in teacher pay, and among the very highest in terms of the proportion of the population of police killings of unarmed people of color and people with disabilities. These are just a few of the items on a very long list of egregious policies and practices in this state. Unfortunately, Oklahoma is increasingly known as becoming an environmental sacrifice zone and a penal colony. This works against our desires to make Oklahoma a place where people and businesses want to relocate, where people want to live. Notifying ICE, including ICE officers in the jail itself, contributes to making Oklahoma an unwelcoming and hostile place to live. Contributes to a perception that we are a place that profits off the misery of other human beings. Tearing families apart does not make our community stronger. Instead, it contributes to our embarrassingly egregious and inhumane reputation nationally and internationally. Please use your limited power wisely and humanely. Do not willingly cooperate with the unnecessarily brutal and inhumane abuses at the federal level. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradshaw. Tasneem Almoredes.
Go Taz.
Hello. My name is Tasneem Al-Michael. I am a resident of the city of Oklahoma City as well as Oklahoma County. And I am also a DACA recipient. I'm an undocumented American, and I say that specifically. I actually did not find out that I was undocumented until I was 16 years old. I will say that in terms of my background, I actually come from a mixed status family, where in most cases, it's usually parents or guardians who are undocumented. It's actually quite the opposite in my case, where my folks and the rest of my family members are documented, and I'm the only one who is not. unique situation, but nonetheless still a problematic situation altogether. I'll also say this, as a DACA recipient, I'm also a student at the University of Oklahoma. I've also been an employee of the Oklahoma State government, both as a Senate messenger and as a legislative assistant this past session. I mentioned those things as very important. I say that because not only are undocumented immigrants considered in roles of labor or things that are considered beneath most members that are of not POC origin, but they also do professional jobs and work in a capacity that gives individuals dignity and do things to serve our community. I want to ask and plead and demand that the County of Oklahoma County limit, mitigate, and cease all of its connection as well as any cooperation with Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement, because the deportation of residents of this county is removing good, hard-working, and honest individuals from being able to survive, live, and provide for their families. We have no use doing this in the first place. It doesn't do anything to help not just our communities, our economy, and our livelihood. It doesn't do anything but put a burden onto the county and onto taxpayers who are in this community. It is also a fact that, and I say this because I also come from a place of privilege within the region of the city. I'm fortunate enough to live on the northwest side of the city, where a lot of police and law enforcement officials aren't as present as much as they are in particular areas such as the northeast and the south side, where there are continuing things such as these checkpoints. I know a speaker earlier had mentioned the idea of state IDs. I know in plenty of regions around the United States, something as municipal IDs have been offered by their counties as a way to help protect the residents of their city whenever the federal government is doing things to disenfranchise its citizens of its home. On top of all of these things, I am very much so aware of the power that the county government has to ensure the protection of the citizens, that law enforcement has the ability to ensure the protection of the citizens, and that each and every one of you on this trust have a responsibility, not just to the individuals who are able to vote to place the individuals who can appoint you here, but also to all the other individuals who are being able to contribute to their communities. I stand here as a place of privilege to be able to address you while there are so many individuals who are constantly being separated from their families without a choice, without the ability to come speak out. And so here I am being able to have that privilege to speak to you today. I appreciate you. I thank you for your public service, but I also demand that you perform your public duty, which is to protect your residents and your people.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Brendan Paulette White.
Go Tez.
Thank you, first of all, for allowing us this opportunity to speak. My name is Rena Gay. I'm a resident of Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County, and I'm the director of a local nonprofit called Just Future. And about a month ago, after a very long period of reading and being alarmed about the situation with our immigration policies, I called a meeting of people in this area to meet together and find ways to act to change policies and to save the situation with the families that are being separated and the children that are being imprisoned. I've been an organizer for a long time, and it was one of the largest attendance of a meeting like that I'd ever put together. It was basically set for a small room. We were packed in there, at least probably over 50 people there. We've continued to meet on a weekly basis, and we're forming teams to work in different areas. A little over a week ago, I organized an event it was part of a nationwide, or actually a global effort called Lights for Liberty. And there had already been several events set up in Oklahoma, but I didn't see one in Oklahoma City. So really, at the last minute, I decided to do that. And again, attendance at that was very surprising to me, because there was very limited outreach done in that short period of time, but over 100 people attended. It was on a Friday night at 9 o'clock, and we stood vigiling across from the Oklahoma County Detention Center. And at that same time, we kicked off a petition drive. And so far, we're not closing down petitions. We're still open to people signing that. But as of July 12th, the evening of July 12th, we have 700 and I think I just looked at it, I think it was 721 signatures. And it's very unofficial kind of petition online. Not everybody is necessarily living in Oklahoma County that is signing it, but I think it indicates the level of concern and desire for action to deal with the policies. So finally, I just want to conclude that during your regular meeting, you talked about the point that you need to listen to all voices, and that's true. But I think when you do that, it's important to recognize that some of those voices have been the recipients of bad information that is not based on verifiable facts. That there are people in our country, in our world, that are using fear for their own political purposes and our own profit, including in the media. And we need to look at actual facts and go by that, and not the emotional things that people are led to believe about what's going on down at our southern border, that really focuses our immigration policies targeting strictly black and brown people for particular hostility. And I think we, as public servants, and I appreciate you're doing that, to deal with a situation, a really dire situation in our jail above and beyond ICE. But I think it's really behooves you to remember that you need to look at what's real, and not listen to some voices that are not working in the best interest of everybody. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gregg. Harvey Jenkins?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for the opportunity to speak to you about it, about the issues that are being discussed here. The Oklahoma County Jail is not a safe place. And I know that the committee has been working on trying to improve that, but I'm not sure that the committee necessarily has a good understanding as how bad it is. By the way, I'm fat, I know. I want to show this to you if I can approach. That's a piece of fiberglass, it looks like a piece of cotton. I spent 2 tours of duty at the Oklahoma County Jail. One 2 or 3 years ago, as part of a criminal case that I'm named in, and I waited there until I could make bail and leave. And the second time I was late to court for a hearing by a couple hours because my car broke down. And so my bond was revoked, and I had to spend another 5 months just trying to get the bond that had been tripled taken care of. That piece of cotton is something I carry in my wallet all the time. As a reminder, it comes from the mat from the cell that we as inmates are sleep on. And that my cellmate had taken that piece of cotton and put it in the faucet of the sink where we get our water, the water that we drink and use. And that's what it looks like after about 3 days of use. I was told that there's mold, and that is not something that is unknown to the committee, and people are trying to work on it, and I realize that's hard. But if you can imagine that filter after 3 days looking that gray, and that's a year old. And what it must be like putting that in your body. When you put in jail, you're there, incarceration is bad enough, but when you know that you're being poisoned, and it happens day after day for 5 months, that's a pretty hard position to put a human being in. So it's not safe enough for just regular, for detainees with ICE-related issues. It's bad for any human being. And again, I have sympathy because I know that process is not an easy one to fix overnight. There's another situation that I would like to let you know about because I don't think that you could possibly know, even though I've been reading some of the reporting as to the seriousness to which you're taking this issue of human safety and public safety in the jail. I'm an old guy, I'm a fat guy, I got medical problems. When I was in my last tour at the jail, there was a transition between the healthcare medical staffing company that was leaving and a new medical staff firm that was taking over. It was a bit chaotic, and there were periods of time when people couldn't get their medications because the transition and the staffing issues had not been resolved. Well, for an old guy who's fat, who has a lot of medications, that can be critical. The one doctor I understand who's in charge of the entire complex, maybe 1,000, 1,200 or more patients, made a decision to stop the medication that I take to control my stomach from bleeding. I tried so many times to get to see the doctor to tell him that this was becoming an issue and a problem, but I could never get a chance to see the doctor. When the staffing issues were finally changed over, we were all informed one day after missing several doses of medications, everybody on our floor, that the reason for the chaos was that the PA or some person with the last staffing company was angry, so he or she deleted all of the medical records, and so it was hard to figure out what medicines that the inmates were on.
So you're approaching your time if you want to make your formidable points.
Okay, I'm sorry, thank you for that. The bottom line is that because of situations like that, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought.
A couple more seconds.
What?
Just a couple more seconds, sorry.
Yeah, because of situations like that, you can actually die. I'm under the care of the OU Cancer Center now, related to issues of what happened to me in that jail. And that's the fixes that are involved to take care of situations like this are really easy, but they're not going to be fixed if you don't take care of the conflicts of interest that exist and you don't take the actions to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Deacon.
I didn't want to go there to get a death sentence.
James Potts?
Good afternoon. I know you've had some powerful and eloquent speakers address you about the issues and what I affectionately refer to as city county. I don't even have to put the jail on it. It says it all. County detentions, as you know. So, allow me to say this. I respectfully request the trustees exclude any office space for Immigration Customs Enforcement in the new contract with the Oklahoma County Detention Center. I make this request for the sake of the county's residents' humanity and their safety, and the safety of the sheriff, his deputies, and the staff. whereas the sheriff should be building better community relations, the inclusion of ICE officers housed in the detention center will negatively impact that goal. I also noticed, although you may be referred to as the jail trust, your official title is Criminal Justice Authority. Towards that end, I might suggest you ask the commissioners to develop a program where the county can issue IDs. Government, you are a government, our county government issued ID. We would need any ICE officers. Further, I suspect there are some lawyers in this office, and I know that the district attorney's office is quite close by. Perhaps the board could find the statute number requiring someone to have an ID. Oh, this is my baby. I believe it was item number 4, where the trustees have moved and approved deferring action on the larger contracts, including commissary and food service. I don't know if any of you have enjoyed the hospitality of Sheriff Wetzel or our previous sheriff, but let me tell you, that's the worst bologna you've ever tasted in your life. And perhaps you might want to trouble yourselves to go over there at supper time and get yourself one of them bologna sandwiches, and you might decide to spend more money for food service and improve the quality of the food served to those persons, those humans.
Mr. Potts, you're nearing your time.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The only thing I'd like to say is regarding the number of inmates handled. You can back that number out. Take $50,000, divide by the number paid, and you'll know how many people they've handled.
Thank you, Mr. Potts. Serena Romanovsky. Is that enough?
She had to go to work.
Thank you. Senator Bonner?
Good afternoon, I guess, at this point. I'm honestly, truly very, very disturbed, kind of listening to what's going on here, kind of hearing the representatives in the back. The lack of awareness and the check of reality is very disturbing to me. The 3 gentlemen who I have a lot of respect for, I know that they've been representatives of the Oklahoma County Jail for quite a while, and I know they are public servants, and I know that their intentions are good, and I know that they don't make the policies, but their lack of awareness and the reality of what is happening to people like me, people in my family, people within my neighborhoods, and people within my communities, people of color, being segregated and separated from their families, being put in cages. Do you guys realize what's happening in the United States of America? Do you realize there are concentration camps being built? Do you realize in Lawton, Oklahoma, a military base that was created to protect the citizens of the United States of America is now building camps to house
children who've been separated from their families. So to have those three gentlemen come up here without having done their homework, to know and give you the numbers that you're asking for, and to try to create this facade that everything is normal, it's disturbing to someone like me. It took me over 15 years to become an American citizen, and I've got my documentation with me. I'm someone like Tasmin. My parents became citizens before I hit the age of 18, so I had to go through the process by myself. And the reality of today is that I have to carry this paperwork with me so that I am not accidentally put in these ICE detention centers, because this is the reality of America. When American citizens, read the statistics, have been accidentally been arrested by this Gestapo regime that you've unleashed within the streets. This is the reality for me. American citizens illegally and unlawfully accidentally detained by ICE agents who spent years in detention without bail or bond. If you don't believe me, the next time I show up here, which maybe next week, I'll bring you those statistics as well, and I may show up with a larger crowd. As far as the Oklahoma County Jail goes, PD Sheriff Taylor, I've got a lot of respect for you. I know the conditions there aren't well, and I know that it's almost impossible to do well with the conditions that you've got going on for you. But I beg of you, I plead with you, get those ICE officers out of your county jail now. Get them out, because you and I both know that those who are undocumented, you said it's the same thing that was happening before, aside the fact that you've got the 2 extra agents there now, right? So remove them. We don't need them doing clerical work, as you called them, or as your representatives called them. In my last moments, and Chairwoman Everest, and I just want to be very honest, I'm a very honest person. I'm very disturbed by the fact that you had a human being who'd spent months and months in your county jail, who brings you a cotton ball that, he took a lot of risk to get that to you, and you were afraid to even pick it up and look at it. Well, those human beings at that county jail are drinking that water. You were afraid to even pick up the cotton ball to analyze it, and you're the person in charge of reforming, right? So those are my concerns. I brought each of you guys a copy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was established by the former First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. This is what America was. This is what America is and should be. Okay, this is what we have championed and gathered the rest of the world around. And if somebody would be willing to hand these trustees each one of these copies. Article 1, right to equality. Article 2, freedom from discrimination. Article 3, right to life, liberty, and personal security. Article 4, freedom from slavery. Article 5, freedom from torture and degrading treatment. Article 6, right to recognition as a person before the law. Article 7, right to equality before the law. Article 8, right to remedy for violations of rights. Article 9, freedom from arbitrary arrest and exile. Article 10, right to fair public hearings. And it goes on and on up to its 30th right. Are you guys aware of those rights? Do you know you're violating them every day inside that Oklahoma County jail? Again, I don't blame the sheriff because you've not given him the resources to meet these rights. You are all accountable for what's happening at the county jail, and we want accountability and we want transparency. We are demanding the immediate removal of the ICE agents.
Thank you, Ms. Bain. Sherry Dickerson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Normally, being clergy and being a community activist and advocate, my ability to remain stoic and unemotional usually remains intact. Today, not so much. Not so much because many of the things that are being spoken on, I live in fear of every day. Like Ms. Vanna spoke, she carries her documentation. I have the privilege and I carry my passport. When you find out that you are a person who decides that they want to try to be a voice for those that don't have the opportunity and sometimes live in fear because of retribution, you take risk, and I do so willingly, and I am humbled to serve. But when you are a woman or a person who identifies as non-binary in melanated skin, the risks are so much higher because my body is criminalized and the color of my skin precedes me in every facet of my everyday life. Messaging and verbiage is important. Most of my friends who are undocumented are simply wanting to be able to contribute to a country that they love, that they work in, that they pay taxes to for a daily basis. They want to be heard and they want to be respected. Like each person who is a citizen of the United States. I've served my country. I did so because I chose to, because I wanted to emulate that of my parents. I got into the healthcare field because I wanted to be able to help, because life is sacred. To have persons who hold an office that work inside an entity that is supposed to protect and serve, that degrades the humanity of a person is unnecessary. It's offensive and it's not patriotic. I have a problem with that. I have a problem when some members of this particular, their other peers, when they refer to them as the trustee on the left or the right, when they are an equitable part of this governing body. It does not appear that the intentions are just, and we're simply asking for justice when you can disavow the voice of one of your own. And so messaging is important. Pay attention to what those who you represent see when we're sitting in these halls and sitting in these seats. Sheriff Taylor, I also don't hold you responsible, but I am asking you for and demanding that you demand accountability and to change the systems, to dismantle the systems of racism and oppression, and that is what's happening in the systems of ICE. I've had a child who is sent in the Oklahoma County Jail, and I am still dealing with the health concerns after they have been released. As a mother, there is nothing more humiliating and dehumanizing and devastating to not be able to properly advocate for someone that you have birthed because you're afraid that if she's connected or affiliated with you, that the treatment will be worse. That facility is known as an albatross to many, and this is not about casting blame, but surely none of us want to continue that is the reputation that the Oklahoma County Jail has. I know I don't want it to. I know I want to be able to say that we are living and trying to create a just society.
Ms. Dickerson, your time's almost up. You have the last one.
And the last thing that I want to say, when we refer to those that are being affected by these systems, is that no human is illegal.
Thank you. Ali Shin,
Just left.
Priya Desai. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. Thank you. Hello and good afternoon. My name is Priya Desai. Thank you for allowing us to voice our concerns and ask that you end any collaboration with ICE at the Oklahoma County Jail. I'm the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Call for Reproductive Justice, and I'm also the daughter of immigrant parents. Today, I'm here to implore you to stop collaborating with ICE and feeding the deportation machine. On Saturday, nearly 400 people came together at Fort Sill to demand getting ICE out of our neighborhoods, counties, cities, towns, and Oklahoma, period. Many of us are in this room today. It is not the job of Oklahoma County Jail employees to assist the federal government in finding and deporting people. There is no legal obligation or mandate to participate in any immigration enforcement programs. This is something that the county has decided to do voluntarily, and I'm here to say that it is imperative that the state and local police stay out of the deportation business altogether. Any agreement with ICE widens the door for racial profiling. ICE's influence in the local criminal justice system undermines efforts to reduce racial bias in policing. In fact, it incentivizes it and puts people of color in this country at a greater risk for harassment and harm. The community's tax dollars are wasted by paying for the cost of immigration enforcement. Local taxes should not be spent to do the federal government's job. ICE does not reimburse counties for any of the costs to assist with immigration enforcement, meaning the county is essentially subsidizing deportations. Any immigration enforcement agreement exposes the city or county to legal liability and costly lawsuits. Local police involvement in federal immigration enforcement has resulted in the violation of rights of citizens and non-citizens alike. As the county many resulting in damages against the city, county, and state and corrections agencies. Any agreement with ICE means more deportations. Any agreement with ICE makes it that much harder to encourage a county to stop holding or transferring people to ICE. In short, these agreements in OK County are tearing families apart. I come to you today to ask that you end any collaboration with ICE at the Oklahoma County Jail. It is the humane and just thing to do, especially as a matter of harm reduction to immigrant communities. You are in a position of power. Please use it wisely. All immigrants deserve equal protection under the law as laid out in our Constitution. Ending any ICE agreement means affirming immigrants' humanity in our own. No human being is illegal on stolen indigenous land. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Donna Compton.
That's a tough act to follow.
Thank you.
I have a 15-year history as a hospital chaplain here in Oklahoma City. I'm also a minister, and I preach wildly at various places. I have a history in the newspaper business also a long time ago. And I learned about what was going on in Central America actually in the mid-'80s. And I invite all of you, I actually implore you to go back and study what has actually happened to the countries where people are fleeing, so that is why they are here. What we need to do as a country is a Marshall Plan that restores those countries so that we stop having this problem. Because we have a lot of responsibility there. Corporatism backed up by our U.S. Armed Services enforce the rights of big landowners to run immigrants off the land and into the cities, and then we're brutal with them. Actually, we started doing this at the turn of the last century, early 1900s. You can't blame it on communism or socialism. They didn't exist in their current forms until the 1920s. So we have some responsibility we need to take. I want to talk about a meta issue here in my bailiwick. You know, preachers, we have 20 minutes, so my professor said, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you just said. Well, you don't have time for me to do that. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. In your Bible, Moses fled from a death sentence into Midian. He was received by Jethro and his daughters. If he had been sent back, he would have been killed. Mary and Joseph and their infant son, Jesus, fled into Egypt because all the baby boys were being killed in Israel. If they had been stopped at the border and separated, and Jesus put in a cage, where do you think we would be today? I visited communes in Central America when I was in seminary. It was in Nicaragua and El Salvador. And I promise you that the people in Nicaragua were happier and they were safer than the people in El Salvador. And El Salvador is where we were propping up a brutal dictator. Now, on a personal level, I have a longtime friend whose family came here from Guatemala. her father was in law enforcement there. And he got sideways with the repressive government and had to flee for his life. The only choice was that he stay there and die or come here illegally with his whole family. They're wonderful, hardworking people, all of them contributing, and yet one uncle got stopped for some minor infraction and taken to the jail, or taken into custody, and he was supposed to raise, the family needed to raise $5,000 by that afternoon to keep him from going to Tulsa. Money that was to go to the local ICE office here. And my friend, who is an attorney and also a man of good faith, works in immigration law and actually told us exactly how that check had to be filled out so that ICE would receive it, because it couldn't just have ICE on it.
Ms. Compton, your time is coming near.
All
I'd
right.
like to make your
Thank
best
you.
point.
All right, I want to say these are real people. They don't deserve what's happening to them. And when I was in Representative Langford's office, he was talking about how all these things were happening. I asked him, how many of the people that they're processing like this are white? Dead silence. So I want you to know we have a lot of things to deal with here. But the one thing that you really do have control over that I'm asking you to do is to take our Oklahoma County Jail out of the ICE pressure mechanism.
Thank you, Ms. Compton. Zoe Kapusinski, how do you say that, please? My apologies. How do you say your last name?
Hi, Zoe Kapusinski. Thank you for giving me the time this afternoon to speak. I'll keep it brief because I think a lot of people have spoken before me who are a lot more educated and well-versed on the subject. I was really heartened to hear from the veteran educator who spoke earlier. I currently am a high school biology teacher on the south side of Oklahoma City, and I'd just like to say that I have seen firsthand the impact that these immigration policies and ICE, or the threat of ICE, have had on our students. One of my students last year, starting in day 2, she spent every single day, every single lunch period with me, hanging out in my classroom. And about a month into school, she disclosed to me that her mom had been deported the previous December. And she is in a situation where her father, to make sure that ends were being met, he worked out of state. She was basically being a sole caretaker for her sister, and she missed her mom a lot. This is one example of a story that is replicated all over the country, and especially in the state of Oklahoma. We have a lot of students in Oklahoma City, in Oklahoma County, who are either directly affected by these policies or are afraid of being affected by these policies. So please heed the words that you've heard earlier and after me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Daniel Helm.
Hi, thanks for the time. My name is Daniel Helm. I'm a resident of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma County. I'm also an educator at the University of Oklahoma as a graduate student. And I work in the art department there, and I wanted to recount an experience I had dealing with the Oklahoma County Jail, and in particular the ICE enforcement aspects of that. There's a person in the arts community in Norman who got picked up for a minor nonviolent infraction here in the city. They were booked, went to jail, and their bond was paid. After their bond was paid, they were not released because they are here as a DACA recipient. They were held for, it seemed like more than 48 hours, but it seems like it must have been at least the 48 hours. And after that point, they were sent to Tulsa, and they eventually were trying to have the court system was trying to revoke their DACA status. And it fortunately was blocked by a federal judge in California. But this was all before they ever had any sort of court hearing for the original infraction. I'm not as well educated about these issues as most of the folks in this room, but when I see a situation where someone potentially will be deported before being found guilty of anything, when they thought that their status here was somewhat secured through their receiving DACA, it's very troubling, and I think it is emblematic of a more systematic pressure on folks that aren't as highly regarded in our community by institutions. And one of the ways I experienced this was when I was trying to find out information about this person as they were in the jail. I used the jail locator. You type in their name, whatever, to search them. Well, this person's last name had a hyphen in it. Our jail locator, the search engine, you cannot use a hyphenated name to locate someone. But you have to include their last name to even find them. Luckily, I have an undergraduate degree in computer science. I risked violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in order to get access to the database and find out this information. But these are the small things that we see, reinforced in small systems in our society day in and day out that white folks often don't acknowledge because we don't come up against them. And so, just to wrap up, it pains me to see my students or people in my community fear that they or their families are going to be deported for things that they're not found guilty of, but they're merely accused of. And I would really just ask that with your powers, you do anything you can to stop the county jail from collaborating with ICE now and in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Helm. Julianne Ward.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. I'm here to request respectfully that you remove ICE officers from the Oklahoma County Jail immediately. I was born in Oklahoma. English is my first language. I'm apparently white. I'm about to overstay my parking meter. I don't have any proof of my citizenship with me, unlike my colleagues who've spoken already. If I get a parking ticket, that will be a minor inconvenience for me. And for some of my community members here in the audience, this would be a life or death problem to have a minor traffic violation. I'd like to mention 2 reasons that I have for requesting that you remove ICE officers from the jail. The first is philosophical. It's about the foundational principles of our democracy, and it's about due process and the presumption of innocence. Being booked into the jail, as we all know, is not a declaration of guilt. A person has not been tried, evidence has not been sought or heard. If we release people directly from the jail into the hands of ICE, we are violating their right to due process. They are being held without a charge, and if they're deported, they're being punished for crimes they may not have committed. The second is practical, and it's about good old-fashioned right and wrong. We know what's going on in ICE detention camps. Extreme deprivation, unsanitary conditions, sexual assault, psychological torture, physical violence. No one, even the people who are doing the most harm in our communities, no one deserves this. It's torture, and we have agreed as a community not to participate with the Declaration of Human Rights that you've all read. We have a moral and ethical imperative to protect our community from this inhumane system. So we're really smart people here in Oklahoma. We are very creative. We can come up with another way to determine a person's identity. We've gotten several suggestions already. Let's do that as soon as possible, and let's remove those agents from our jail. They have no business being there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Zari Schroeder. I'm going to have that one. Isaiah Daniel.
Hi,
My name is Josiah Daniel, resident here in Oklahoma City, and the county, of course. What I'd like to perhaps remind you all of today is that in 1995, here in Oklahoma City and in this county, our community experienced a devastating terrorist attack on the Murrow building. We still live with that pain, and we know better than anyone in the nation the violence and destruction of white nationalism and white supremacy. That is why our community must use our voices to stand down similar manifestations of white nationalism and xenophobia like concentration camps. And Commissioner Calvi said he understood the fear some people have about competition for jobs from immigrants, alluding to that being somehow a justification for the concentration camps we see today. But fear is no reason to ruin families and generations to come by being complicit in any way, shape, or form in concentration camps. Any way, shape, or form. I do have one comment for Commissioner Calvi, and that is that bravery is kindness. Bravery is kindness. And I remind all of my fellow privileged and extremely 1% elite privileged of those of you on this die today to never forget what happened here in 1995, and that what's happening now is just a different form of the same thing. It's the same ideology, and we're just masking it over. So, do not forget the lessons that we know better than anyone else in this country. And if you fail to remember those lessons, then what was the point? What was the point? So, I trust in you all to use your memories, to use historical reference points, and to not give us BS explanations for, I understand both sides. People in cages is not okay, period. End of story. There's no justification for it. There's no Christian justification for it. There's no non-Christian justification for it. I don't care. I'm not here with any lobbying dollars behind me. This is, what you're seeing here today are those that are advocating on behalf of civil rights and human rights, that it comes from their hearts. It comes from, I'm taking time off from work today to be here that I don't have. But I'm doing it because it matters. And it matters for my two kids that are privileged white kids that don't have to deal with any of these issues. And if you don't understand that, and if you're just going to stare with blank faces and just kind of ask questions like, well, we got a lot of people here, should we limit everybody to 3 minutes? Shows you really don't understand it. And I think between now and going forward, you better start working a little bit harder to demonstrate to us that you understand the problem, the moral problem, and the fact that we are as better positioned than anybody else in the nation to address it.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. That ends our public comment. I want to thank you all for taking your time to express your concerns and your observations and your experiences. Do we have any board comments before we adjourn?
Your Honor, I submitted a request to make public comment. Jack Schrader.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Schrader, come forward.
Come forward?
Yes. I must have misspoken your name. We called it just before Mr. Daniels.
I missed these hearing aids.
I'm sure it was my part. Please go forward.
It's an honor to appear here today and to see so many familiar members of our community and hopefully put a stop to what's going on at the Oklahoma County Jail. We already know the facility is inhumane. It's so inhumane that judges have determined we can't hold federal prisoners in our own jail. Sheriff Taylor. It's gone on since Sheriff Wetzel was a sheriff. Now, as to these people who, I never did hear a straight answer. Are there 2 ICE officers at the county jail? When you asked that question, the 3 members all looked down at the floor and kind of shuffled their feet. They never said really yes or no what they were doing. You asked very firm, great questions. how many have been detained this year and turned over to ICE, and how many have been sent home? Again, you got the foot should have fallen. And oh no, we might be able to get you the statistics. When the first person who came up and made comments gave you the exact statistics. There's 661 people who've been turned over to ICE, and of those, over 220 of them have been deported. Now, let me remind you, these people who are being turned over to ICE are pretrial detainees. All the lawyers among you know what that means. A pretrial detainee has absolute rights under the United States Constitution. And when you turn them over to people like ICE, who I might say, it sounds like the Oklahoma County law enforcement are trusting ICE agents to tell them whether there's a problem with these immigrants or these people who don't have proper documentation. Why in the world would we trust anything ICE tells us when they're being used as a political arm to punish people who don't have the same color of skin as most of us? I'll end my comments by saying you have the power to make a motion here today, and I think there's enough votes that it would carry to get the ICE agents out of the Oklahoma County Courthouse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shedd. That concludes the public comment. Thank you for speaking up.
Madam Chairman, may I comment? Trustee Brown, thank you for adding this item to the agenda. Everyone who came to speak and express yourself today, thank you. And I will just speak for myself as a trustee Ekwo, that you've been heard, and your thoughts and your expressions are respected and appreciated, and will be carried through myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can't hear you.
I appreciate you taking the time to come here. I know everybody's working, they're busy, and we need your input. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion for adjournment. Is there a second?